No one could have predicted the moment the stars themselves seemed to lean closer to watch. Across countless galaxies where civilizations warred for dominance and extinction was the norm, one species stood oddly untouched: humans. The first time the scouts noticed it, they paused in disbelief. They studied, calculated, even debated among themselves. Every other intelligent species had been culled or enslaved over the eons, yet humans thrived, fought, and survived in ways that defied expectation. It was as if the universe itself had given them a protective cloak. Dr. Ilara Vance watched the monitors in silent fascination, her heart hammering in a rhythm she barely understood. On the surface of the newly colonized planet Ardentis 7, human explorers were moving through dense forests, clearing paths and establishing shelters with a mixture of care and speed. Their leader, Captain Jonas Hale, was meticulous but approachable, a man who carried the weight of responsibility like a quiet storm, steady, inevitable, unstoppable. Ilara had observed countless alien species before, but there was something different about the humans, something that radiated beyond their fragile forms. The aliens who had been monitoring humanity, known among themselves as the Thrynn, communicated in patterns of color and vibration, incapable of grasping the human concept of emotion, sacrifice, or moral choice. They had watched wars, witnessed betrayal, and calculated probabilities with merciless logic. And yet every attempt to corner humans, to bend them, to strike them down had failed, not because humans were physically superior, but because they were unpredictable. They made choices that defied statistical models, choices rooted in hope, in love, in loyalty. On Ardentis 7, the humans were unaware of being observed. A child, Lena, no older than 10, ran through the towering ferns with a laugh that echoed like music through the dense canopy. Behind her, Jonas called her back with a grin, but he let her run a little longer, letting freedom breathe in the air. The simplicity of such moments was alien to the Thrynn. They could not quantify joy, yet it struck their sensors with a force they could not ignore. Ilara leaned closer to her console, noting the tension in the humans' movements as the day shifted toward night. The forest, beautiful but treacherous, was home to creatures both wondrous and dangerous, yet humans moved with caution and courage intertwined. They sang to calm each other. They shared warmth when fear threatened. They argued, yes, but always with a strange thread of connection that never severed entirely. It was not perfection. It was something far stranger: resilience. The Thrynn Admiral Vorthak flickered across the viewing chamber in disapproval. They are not significant. Their technology is primitive. Their weapons are laughable compared to our fleets. We could crush them in moments. His voice reverberated like sharp crystal. Ilara's translator hummed softly. Perhaps, she said almost hesitantly, but that does not seem to be the point. Observe how they respond to each other, to danger. Observe what they do when there seems to be no reward or benefit. Notice their choices. Vorthak's colors deepened, signaling irritation. Choices are irrelevant. The universe responds only to strength, to power, to survival probability. They are anomalies. Unpredictable, yes, but ultimately inconsequential. Ilara did not respond immediately. She simply watched the humans, watched the firelight flicker in their eyes, watched Jonas gently tend to an injured teammate without hesitation, watched Lena press a trembling hand against a creature of the forest that had wandered too close, calming it with laughter and song. Something inside her stirred, something that could not be measured or quantified by logic alone. As night fell, the Thrynn's sensors caught subtle movements in the sky, a distant flash not from the planet but from beyond it. Humans stopped their tasks and gazed upward, pointing, whispering, speculating. Unlike any other species, they did not panic. They questioned. They wondered. They hoped. They connected. Ilara's voice was barely audible to herself. That is why they are not targeted. That is why they survive. Not because they are stronger, but because they are human. In the observing chamber, a silent tension built. The Thrynn did not understand it yet, but a truth had begun to pierce the carefully constructed armor of their logic. This species, this fragile, unpredictable, utterly remarkable species, carried within them a force no weapon could erase, the power of choice, the courage of heart, and the stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. And as the stars blinked overhead, the humans continued their work. Their laughter, Their small acts of courage, completely unaware that somewhere in the void, eyes were beginning to understand and fear the true nature of what they had underestimated. The night air on Ardentis 7 was alive with the hum of unseen life. Shadows stretched across the ground as strange, iridescent insects drifted past the human encampment. Jonas Hale sat near the fire, his fingers tracing the edge of a map spread on the ground. Around him, his team, engineers, medics, and explorers, moved with quiet purpose, each task blending necessity with care. Every sound, every flicker of movement was noticed, catalogued, and judged by eyes that were far away, observing without interruption. The Thrynn had begun their experiments, subtle and precise. They probed human perception, nudged the environment in ways designed to intimidate or unsettle but never directly attacked. Small tremors, a strange rustle in the undergrowth, creatures behaving oddly. Nothing overt, yet enough to test the human's nerves. From the high-tech observation chamber orbiting silently above the planet, Vorthak's colors shifted, signaling satisfaction at their first small manipulations. "We shall see if they break under pressure," he said. "Their anomaly is interesting, but anomalies can be corrected." Ilara Vance watched the screens, her pulse quickening. She could see every hesitation, every unspoken fear, and every choice the humans made in response. There was something in the way they acted that made her question the Thrynn's assumptions. Jonas's hand rested on the shoulder of a young medic, Mara, who flinched at the sudden rustle of a bush. "It's all right," he said calmly, voice steady. "Stay with me. We move together. No panic. No division. Just presence, courage, and empathy." The Thrynn struggled to interpret it. "Why do they not flee?" One of the observers pulsed. "Their species is fragile. They should scatter. They should cower. It is illogical. They do not follow logic as we do," Ilara said, voice almost trembling. "Their strength is not in domination or survival probability alone. Their strength is connection. They protect each other, even at risk to themselves. They act with intention beyond survival. That is something you cannot quantify." The night deepened. Lena, the child, had fallen asleep near the warmth of the fire, her small hand gripping a stuffed toy she had insisted on bringing from home. Mara checked on her quietly, and Jonas watched both with a soft intensity that contrasted sharply with the Thrynn's cold calculations. A sudden movement in the forest caused the humans to freeze instinctively. A creature, the size of a wolf but covered in scales that shimmered like liquid silver, emerged from the darkness. Its eyes glowed faintly, but it made no hostile move. Jonas crouched slowly, spreading his hands. "Easy," he whispered. Mara's hand trembled as she mirrored him. The child stirred, sensing the tension, but Jonas nodded to her and she relaxed. The creature paused, sniffed the air, and then, in a movement so subtle it could have been imagined, turned away and vanished. The Thrynn sensors blinked. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Why did they not attack? Why did they not flee? Vorthak's tone sharpened, the colors jagged with irritation. "They are defenseless." "They are not," Ilara said softly, leaning closer. "Defenseless is physical. This is something else. Look at how they observe, how they decide. They do not act out of fear or aggression alone. They act out of choice, out of responsibility, out of care. That is the difference." The humans returned to their routines, checking equipment, tending fires, and speaking softly among themselves. Every step, every word was a quiet assertion that they belonged here, that they would endure. They were tired. They were vulnerable. But they were awake to each other, awake to the life around them, awake to the choices they could make. Hours later, as the sky turned a faint violet before dawn, Jonas sat alone at the edge of the camp, staring into the horizon. Ilara's eyes were on him from across the void, trying to understand the inexplicable human resilience. Jonas traced patterns in the soil with a stick, thinking of the challenges ahead. Colonization was never simple, never safe. Yet there was a determination in him, a refusal to yield that seemed to vibrate outward, touching every human near him. Vorthak's frustration grew. "They are illogical, unpredictable, and dangerous in their simplicity," he growled. "We must find a way to exploit weakness, to force a failure." Ilara's voice was firm, almost a whisper of warning. "You cannot force it. They are stronger in ways you do not understand. Every test you impose only strengthens them. They are human, and humans survive because they choose to survive, not because the universe allows it." In that quiet moment, before the first light of day painted the forest in shades of gold and green, something unmeasurable passed through the human camp. A laugh, a touch, a shared glance of reassurance, simple moments fleeting yet powerful. And somewhere in the infinite void, the Thrynn began to realize that these humans were no ordinary species. They were more than statistics, more than potential prey. They were a force shaped by choice, courage, and connection, an unpredictable anomaly that could not be broken by fear or strength alone. Ilara pressed her hand to the glass of the observation chamber. "They are not just surviving," she whispered. "They are teaching, and they don't even know it." The stars blinked silently above, and humanity's quiet defiance echoed through the cosmos, invisible but impossible to ignore. The dawn on Ardentis 7 was heavy with mist, curling around the human camp like a silver veil. Captain Jonas Hale moved through it with quiet precision, checking the perimeter, ensuring every sensor and barrier was functioning. Every human moved with purpose, exhausted yet alert, wary yet calm. They had begun to notice subtle anomalies, plants swaying when no wind blew, strange sounds echoing in the distance, shadows moving just out of sight. But instead of fear, they responded with curiosity and vigilance. Jonas knelt beside Mara, who had spent the night cataloging the unusual flora. "Keep your focus," he said softly. "We adapt, we observe, and we act when necessary. Nothing more, nothing less." Her eyes met his, and she nodded, a flicker of relief passing between them. Far above, in the orbiting observation chamber, Vorthak's irritation had grown into obsession. The Thrynn had escalated their subtle manipulations. Electromagnetic pulses that caused equipment to fail briefly, sudden shifts in gravity readings, and the occasional illusory presence in the forests. Every attempt was designed to provoke panic, to force a mistake. Yet the humans adapted. They learned. They supported each other. Ilara Vance watched the humans carefully. She had seen courage before, but never like this. Humans faced uncertainty and danger with a combination of logic and emotion that created something wholly unexpected. Resilience born of awareness and connection. A human would stumble and another would reach out to steady them, not because it was efficient, but because it was right. That was a variable the Thrynn could not calculate. As the humans moved deeper into the forest for a reconnaissance mission, Jonas's voice carried easily over the soft hum of machinery. "Stay in pairs. Watch each other. If anything feels wrong, communicate immediately. Trust your instincts, but trust each other more." Lena, the child who had begun exploring the forest with cautious curiosity, ran ahead briefly, stopping to examine a luminous flower. Jonas caught up, smiling, and crouched beside her. "Curiosity is good," he said, "but danger is everywhere. Always stay aware." Her small hand slipped into his and she nodded, the trust between them palpable. The Thrynn's monitors registered every movement, every heartbeat, every minor reaction. "They adjust too quickly. They anticipate patterns we do not see," Vorthak growled. "They are evolving in response to our interference." "This should be impossible," Ilara leaned closer. "It's not impossible. Humans are adaptive. They are unpredictable because they are not driven purely by survival instincts or logic. They are guided by empathy, by awareness of each other, by something we cannot quantify." Suddenly, a tremor shook the ground. Trees swayed violently, and a distant roar echoed through the forest. A massive predator, unseen until now, charged toward the human team. Mara froze, eyes wide, but Jonas reacted instantly. He grabbed her arm and dove to the side, dragging her out of the path of the creature. Lena screamed, but Jonas caught her, shielding her with his body as the predator passed by. The humans responded with precision, not panic. They coordinated silently, guiding one another, forming a protective circle, and eventually the predator retreated, confused by their cohesion. Every observer from the Thrynn ranks leaned forward, stunned. "Why did they not scatter?" Vorthak demanded. "They are human," Ilara said simply. "They survive not because they are stronger, but because they choose to act together, to protect one another even when logic says flight is the safer option. That is the answer you cannot grasp." The humans returned to camp, shaken but unharmed. Around the fire that evening, they shared their experience, their voices low but steady. They did not boast. They did not despair. They simply discussed what had happened, what they had learned, and how they would adapt for tomorrow. Even Lena, though frightened, spoke softly about the predator and what she had noticed, contributing in her small, courageous way. Vorthak's sensors showed rising stress levels in the humans. "They are scared," he said. "Surely fear will break them. Surely fatigue will make them weak." Elara shook her head. "Fear does not break them. It informs them. Fatigue does not make them weak. It forces them to depend on each other. Their strength is not in absence of fear, but in how they respond to it. That is why they survive." As night fell again, the humans tended the fires and shared quiet stories. Their laughter, their small acts of kindness, the gentle reassurance they offered one another, all of it seemed insignificant to a purely logical observer. Yet it radiated a force no weapon could measure, a force that defied statistics and probability. And somewhere far above, in the cold chambers of the Thrynn, the first hints of unease began to form. Humans were not simply surviving their tests. Humans were thriving under them. Every challenge strengthened their cohesion, sharpened their instincts, and reinforced their resilience. Elara pressed her hand against the observation glass. "You see it now, don't you?" she whispered. "The universe has never accounted for a species like this. And the Thrynn are about to learn the truth the hard way. Humans are not just survivors, they are unstoppable when they choose to be." The stars above blinked quietly, indifferent yet bearing witness to a species whose heart and mind refused to yield. And in the forests of Ardentis 7, humanity's quiet defiance had begun to take shape, unassailable, unbreakable, and wholly alive. The next morning on Ardentis 7 began like any other, with mist rising off the forest floor and sunlight breaking through the dense canopy in streaks of gold. But for Captain Jonas Hale and his team, the sense of calm was deceptive. Something had changed overnight. The air was heavier, thicker, as if the planet itself were holding its breath. Small tremors pulsed through the soil at irregular intervals. Equipment that had worked perfectly the day before began to flicker, lights dimming and sensors spiking in ways the humans could barely explain. Jonas gathered his team around the central command tent. "Something is different," he said, eyes scanning the group. "Stay alert, trust each other, and keep communication tight. We've faced unknowns before. We adapt, we survive, and we do it together." Lena, clutching her stuffed toy as if it were a talisman, whispered, "Are we in danger, Captain?" Jonas smiled faintly, kneeling to meet her gaze. "Maybe," he said. "But fear is not our enemy, panic is. Remember that." High above, the Thrynn watched with fascination and growing frustration. Vorthak's colors rippled angrily. They adapt too quickly. Every test only strengthens them. Their reactions are coordinated in ways we cannot predict. Elara Vance leaned closer to the observation screen, her eyes reflecting the flickering fires below. "You cannot break them by force," she said softly. "You cannot manipulate them with fear. They survive because they do not act alone. Their power comes from trust, from understanding, from choice." The Thrynn's next intervention was subtle but insidious. Energy surges began to ripple across the forest, triggering strange phenomena. Water would briefly reverse its flow in streams. Gravity shifted in short bursts and strange electrical storms appeared without warning. Humans were pushed to their limits, their equipment failing at crucial moments, their paths disrupted, and yet they did not crumble. Jonas led his team deeper into the forest, navigating treacherous terrain with improvised tools and unwavering focus. When a sudden storm forced them to take shelter in a cavern, the team huddled together, sharing body heat and morale. Mara tended to minor injuries with steady hands, while Jonas and others reinforced their temporary shelter, turning vulnerability into strategy. Lena, despite her fear, helped gather small stones to mark paths for their retreat, contributing courageously to the group. The Thrynn watched, puzzled. They do not break. They do not despair. Why do they not succumb? Vorthak's voice, sharp as shattered glass, demanded an answer. Elara's voice was calm, almost reverent. Because humans make choices even when their survival is uncertain. They help each other because it is right, not because it benefits them. They endure because they refuse to surrender to chaos. You cannot calculate that, you cannot predict it, and that is why they are not just surviving, they are thriving under pressure. As night fell, the humans faced their first truly deadly encounter. A massive predator, unlike any previously observed, emerged from the shadows of the cavern. Its eyes glowed red and its movements were fluid, terrifying, precise. The humans could have fled, but Jonas stood firm. Form a line. Protect each other. We move together. Everyone has a role. Mara checked her weapons, Lena clinging close to Jonas, and the team moved as one entity, coordinated by instinct, trust, and experience. When the creature lunged, they did not scatter. They did not hesitate. They combined tactics, improvisation, and sheer willpower. One member distracted it while another led it into a trap, using the terrain and knowledge of its behavior against it. Finally, with careful precision, the predator was neutralized, alive but restrained, allowing them to study it safely later. The Thrynn sensors registered confusion and something that resembled awe. They are too coordinated, too intelligent in their improvisation, Vorthak admitted reluctantly. They should have fallen. Every calculation fails. Ilara leaned back, her voice soft with wonder. They did not just survive, Vorthak. They adapted. They overcame. That is humanity. They are not merely animals reacting to stimuli. They are a species that chooses courage, that acts with compassion, that thinks beyond immediate danger. That is the anomaly you cannot break. The humans returned to their camp exhausted but victorious, tending to each other's wounds and quietly celebrating their unity. Lena whispered a small prayer. Mara hummed softly, and Jonas sat by the fire, eyes scanning the horizon, mind already planning the next day. Above, the Thrynn began to understand a terrifying truth. Humans were not just unpredictable. They were resilient in ways that no simulation could replicate, strong in ways that did not rely on brute force, and united in ways that logic could never explain. Ilara pressed her hand to the glass of the observation chamber once more. This is why the universe has spared them, she whispered. Not because they are invincible, but because they are something more. Something stronger than fear, stronger than logic, stronger than expectation. They are human, and that is more than enough. The stars above blinked silently, indifferent witnesses to the unfolding revelation. Humanity's spirit, fragile yet unbreakable, had begun to shine through the darkness. And somewhere, deep in the void, the Thrynn realized the battle they thought they understood was already slipping from their grasp. The forest of Ardentes 7 had never seemed so alive, or so dangerous. By mid-morning, the humans realized that the anomalies were no longer isolated events. Entire regions of the terrain shifted unpredictably. Trees moved almost imperceptibly, creating obstacles. Rocks rolled downhill without warning. Streams altered their paths, turning familiar trails into hazards. This was no longer testing curiosity or caution. It was a coordinated systemic trial. Captain Jonas Hale gathered his team at a high point overlooking a valley. His voice was calm, steady, and commanding. We've faced unpredictable terrain before, and we've adapted. Today is no different. Observe, plan, communicate, act together. That's how we survive. That's how we win. Mara adjusted her scanner, noting the shifting gravitational pockets and fluctuating magnetic fields. It's like the planet itself is alive, she said, awe tinged with concern. Jonas nodded. We adapt. That's what we do, the Thrynn observed in fascination from their high-orbit chambers. Vorthak's frustration reached a new peak. They are thriving in chaos, impossible. Every prediction fails. Every contingency is surpassed. Ilara Vance, leaning against the observation console, spoke softly. Not impossible, just human. They survive because they do not see chaos as an enemy. They see it as a challenge, and they face it together. By afternoon, the humans faced their first coordinated attack. A swarm of flying predators, fast and intelligent, descended upon them from above. They moved with precision, circling, testing, attempting to isolate individuals. Mara shouted warnings as Jonas quickly directed the team into a defensive formation. Lena clung to his side, her wide eyes scanning the sky. The humans responded as one. They scattered in patterns designed to confuse, regrouped when necessary, and improvised weapons from the environment. Rocks became barriers, branches became tools, and fire was used strategically to create zones of safety. Every action was deliberate, every decision calculated, but every choice was also guided by empathy and concern for one another. The Thrynn sensors struggled. Why do they anticipate patterns we create? Why do they coordinate with such precision without prior knowledge? Vorthak's voice trembled with irritation. Ilara's eyes shone with understanding. Because they trust each other. Every human instinct, every learned skill, every emotional bond strengthens their ability to respond. It's not just strategy, it's cohesion. That is why they are unstoppable. As the swarm attacked, Jonas noticed a predator aiming for Lena. In a heartbeat, he dove, shielding her with his body. Mara and others acted simultaneously, creating diversions that disrupted the swarm's focus. Lena's scream became a spark of action for the entire group. No one hesitated. No one abandoned their role. Each human complemented the other's movements, reacting instantly to both danger and opportunity. When the predators were finally driven away, the team regrouped, breathing hard but intact. Jonas looked over his crew, his eyes reflecting pride and relief. We adapt, we endure. We survive, not because we are invincible, but because we act together. That is our strength. Remember it. In orbit, Vorthak's frustration boiled over. They are resilient beyond reason. How can they continue to survive? Every effort should have reduced them. Alara's voice was calm, almost reverent. You cannot break something that acts with purpose beyond fear. You cannot calculate courage. You cannot predict hope. That is humanity. Night fell and the humans made camp atop a rocky ridge. The fire crackled and conversations were hushed but deliberate. Each human recounted what they had seen, what worked, what failed, and how they could improve. Even Lena spoke, sharing her observations about the flying predators and how they moved. Her small insights were listened to carefully, respected and integrated into the group's knowledge. Above, the Thrynn were silent for a long moment. They realized that this was not a species that could be overwhelmed by fear, chaos, or exhaustion. Humans absorbed lessons in real time, adapted instantly, and most importantly, acted not for survival alone, but for each other. Every choice, every risk, every small act of courage created a network of resilience that the Thrynn could neither predict nor destroy. Alara pressed her hand to the observation glass. "Do you see it now?" she whispered. "It's not about power, weapons, or dominance. It's about spirit, connection, and choice. That is why humans are not just surviving. That is why the universe, in some way, has spared them. That is why you underestimated them. And that is why you will continue to underestimate them at your peril." The stars above Ardentis 7 twinkled, indifferent, yet watchful. Humanity, exhausted but unbroken, had endured its first large-scale test. They were not only surviving, they were proving, moment by moment, that their greatest strength lay not in what they could destroy, but in what they could protect, in the bonds they chose to honor, and in the courage they refused to abandon. And somewhere far away in the cold void of space, the Thrynn began to understand the truth that would haunt them. Humans were not just unpredictable. Humans were unstoppable when they acted together. The night on Ardentis 7 was unlike any other the humans had experienced. A strange violet aurora shimmered across the sky, bending and twisting in impossible patterns. The air vibrated subtly, a resonance that seemed to whisper through the forest. Every instinct told Captain Jonas Hale and his team that the planet itself was testing them, shaping challenges more dangerous than anything they had faced. Jonas gathered his crew near a natural rock formation, the rising wind tugging at their clothes and hair. "Today," he said firmly, voice steady against the eerie hum of the aurora, "we face the unknown. We do not panic. We do not scatter. We act, together." Mara adjusted her scanner, watching the strange energy distortions that rippled across the forest. "It's as if reality itself is unstable," she said. "We can't predict where hazards will appear next." Jonas nodded, determination etched on his face. "Then we adapt as we always do, step by step, choice by choice." High above, Vorthak's fury was mirrored in jagged pulses across the observation chamber. "They should be broken. Every pattern, every trap, every threat we orchestrate should have crushed them by now." Alara Vance's eyes softened with awe. "They are not broken because their strength is not measured in force. Humans survive because they choose to survive together, even when facing the impossible. You cannot anticipate the choices driven by courage and heart." The first true challenge came swiftly. The forest shifted violently, twisting the terrain into a labyrinth of cliffs and chasms. Electromagnetic storms surged overhead, rendering some instruments useless. The humans were forced to navigate blind, relying on instinct, experience, and each other. Jonas held Lena close, guiding her carefully. "Trust me. Trust the team. Trust yourselves. One step at a time." Mara helped map the shifting terrain while others constructed temporary bridges from fallen branches, rocks, and vines. Every task required ingenuity, coordination, and rapid adaptation. Then the predators arrived. Not one, but a pack, moving with intelligence that suggested coordination far beyond ordinary instinct. They encircled the humans, probing, testing, forcing decisions. Jonas acted instantly, using the terrain to their advantage. He directed Mara to create diversions using controlled fires, while another team flanked with improvised traps. Lena, trembling but courageous, alerted Jonas to subtle movements in the predator's patterns, her observations saving precious seconds. Every human contributed, each small action compounding into a carefully orchestrated defense. The Thrynn monitors recorded every heartbeat, every calculation, every instinctive human reaction. Vorthak's confusion was almost palpable. They anticipate patterns we did not create. They improvise beyond reason. Why are they not broken? Ilara's voice was quiet but unwavering. Because they are human. They do not act for themselves alone. They act for each other. Every choice is guided not just by fear, but by care, courage, and responsibility. That is something no simulation, no algorithm, no predator can destroy. Hours passed. The predators were repelled. The terrain navigated, and the human team emerged battered, exhausted, but intact. Every step had required ingenuity, trust, and relentless courage. The team set camp for the night, tending to injuries, reinforcing shelters, and quietly sharing what they had learned. Lena, her eyes wide but shining, whispered to Jonas, "I was scared, but I wasn't alone." Jonas smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Exactly. That is why we endure. That is why we survive. Always together." In orbit, the Thrynn had begun to understand a terrifying truth. Humans could not be overwhelmed through fear or chaos. Every challenge, every attempt at domination, only strengthened their unity, sharpened their ingenuity, and reinforced their resilience. Ilara pressed her hand to the observation glass, almost trembling with awe. "Do you see it now?" she whispered. "It's not about power. It's not about dominance. It's about connection, courage, and the choice to act with heart. That is why humans survive. That is why they cannot be crushed. That is why the universe, in some way, has protected them." As the aurora faded and the first faint light of dawn touched the forest, the humans rested, not in fear, but in quiet triumph. They had faced the ultimate test of the unknown, and had emerged united, stronger, and more determined than ever. And somewhere beyond the stars, the Thrynn realized that the species they had underestimated would not simply endure. They would redefine what it meant to survive. Humanity's spirit, fragile yet unyielding, had revealed its true power, and the Thrynn could do nothing but watch, bewildered and awed, as the humans prepared for whatever came next, together unstoppable and profoundly human. The forest of Ardentis 7 was silent in the early morning, but the air carried a weight that made every human in the camp tense. Captain Jonas Hale stood at the edge of a ridge, scanning the horizon with a mixture of focus and calm determination. His team moved with quiet precision behind him. This was no ordinary challenge. This was the culmination of everything they had faced, the ultimate test of ingenuity, courage, and unity. Above, the Thrynn had launched a full-scale intervention. Swarms of predators, shifting terrains, energy anomalies, and complex traps had been orchestrated to crush the humans once and for all. In the orbiting observation chamber, Vorthak's colors flashed violently, a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and fear. They should not exist. Every calculation proves they should have fallen. Ilara Vance watched the humans with awe, her hand pressed against the observation glass. "They survive," she said softly, almost in wonder. "Because they are more than calculations, more than statistics. They survive because they act with purpose beyond survival. Because they are human." The first wave struck. An enormous creature, taller than any previously seen, with limbs that could crush a human in a single motion, emerged from the dense forest. Its roar echoed through the trees, shaking the ground. Lena screamed, but Jonas was already moving, pulling her behind him. "Stick together," he shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. "Trust each other. Every move counts." The humans scattered strategically, using terrain, fire, and improvised tools to slow the beast. Mara deployed sensors and traps, predicting its movements, while Jonas coordinated the team with precise commands, each human instinctively covering another. Lena, trembling but brave, shouted warnings about subtle shifts in the predator's behavior, helping the team avoid lethal mistakes. The Thrynn monitors recorded every action, every heartbeat. Vorthak's frustration grew into panic. Why do they anticipate what we do not create? Why do they respond to dangers we control? It is impossible. Ilara's eyes softened. Not impossible. Human. Every choice is informed by courage, by care, by connection. They are not merely surviving, they are protecting each other. That is their strength. That is why you cannot destroy them. Hours passed in a whirlwind of strategy, endurance, and raw courage. The humans outmaneuvered every trap, adapted to every shift, and turned obstacles into tools. When the massive predator lunged at Jonas, Mara and another team member worked together, improvising a net-like trap from vines and branches, redirecting the creature safely away without harming it. Even Lena's small suggestions, simple observations that adults might have overlooked, proved vital to their survival. By dusk, the humans had not only survived, but had gained control over the shifting environment. They had learned to predict patterns, adapt instantly, and cooperate with perfect synchronization. The Thrynn could only observe in stunned silence. Vorthak pulsed furiously, colors jagged with disbelief. How do they persist? Ilara's voice was quiet but firm. Because they choose to persist. They act with intention. They care for one another. They do not see themselves as individuals alone. They are a network of trust, courage, and heart. That is why humans are not just surviving. That is why the universe has never allowed them to be erased. The humans gathered around the fire that evening, exhausted but triumphant. Jonas looked at each member of his team, Mara, Lena, and the others, and spoke softly. We faced impossible odds. We adapted. We survived. Not because we are invincible, but because we chose to be together. That is our greatest strength. That is who we are. Lena hugged her toy, her eyes shining with quiet pride. We did it, she whispered. Yes, Jonas said, smiling. Together. Always. Far above, the Thrynn began to comprehend the truth they had long ignored. Humans were not anomalies to be destroyed or controlled. They were a force shaped by choice, courage, and connection. A species whose resilience was beyond calculation, whose ingenuity was guided by empathy, whose spirit could never be extinguished. Ilara pressed her hand against the glass once more. You see it now, don't you? This is why the universe spared them. This is why they were never your targets, not because they are stronger, but because they are human. And humanity. Humanity is unstoppable. As night fell over Ardentis 7, the stars blinked in silent witness. The humans rested tired but unbroken, hearts and minds aligned in unity. They had faced the ultimate challenge, and they had triumphed, not through power, not through weapons, but through courage, compassion, ingenuity, and the unyielding bonds that defined them. And somewhere beyond the stars, in the cold void of space, the Thrynn understood the truth they could never deny. Humans were not just survivors. Humans were a testament to the strength of the spirit itself, a force that could not be measured, predicted, or conquered. The universe had spared them for a reason. And now, everyone watching in awe and disbelief finally understood why. Humans endured. Humans prevailed. Humans, simply by being human, had rewritten the rules of survival, and that was a power no one, alien or starborn, could ever match.